Great to catch up with Helen Dalton, MP, the member for Murray. Helen, probably our last chat for 2022. A Merry Christmas to you and all of the listeners in your electorate.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas to everyone. It's the end of a very difficult year, I guess, and we're looking forward to 2023.
Now, we think about the farmers in your electorate amongst many others. We'll talk about flood-affected communities in a minute. You're a farmer yourself. Just how are things looking, not just for you, but for all of those hard-working people who are going to have a pretty interrupted Christmas, I gather?
Yes, I think so. I think a lot of people will be harvesting after Christmas, and of course, if you've had a lot of rainfall and you've been exposed to flooding, well, I guess it's insult to injury with your crops. I know on our place a lot of downgrading and, the quality's not there because we've just had too much rainfall. So the Murray electorate's really been hit hard by the floods, and the impacts will be ongoing too. So people just need to be patient, I guess, and look forward to next year. So I visited Hillston and Moama and Moolameen and Willanthry, which is out near Hillston, and Deniliquin, and really have seen and heard a lot about the crop losses and stock losses too right across the electorate. So it's been a tough year.
And Hillston's been a particularly focal point when it comes to the flooding most recently. How's the community holding up?
Look, the community have been wonderful. They've worked together. It's just amazing. In fact, that goes for every other community around the electorate as well. But sandbagging, getting together and helping one another. But I did take a small flight over the town and further out, and the amount of water coming through is unbelievable. So, and all that water's got to go down through the Lachlan and eventually make its way. I think it will this year, probably into the Murray. So waiting for those peaks to go downstream, but very hard for people that have had their homes, especially out on the properties. Homesteads have been inundated with water. It's a tough road to get that all back and clean up.
And you mentioned Moolameen, I think, before as well. That's a community that's been cut off for some time. How are they banding together to get through the challenge?
Yeah, well, that's another point in case. They're the same. They've worked together. It's just been amazing. But I drove through some floodwater to get out there last week. And, of course, they all came out to meet me and talked about the issues such as, what's happening and how they want a flood plan, make sure that they have a proper flood plan. Also talked about healthcare or the lack of, which is really impacting on the community because they've got to drive over 70 kilometres to get any sort of assistance. There is a community nurse that comes out, but it's not enough. They've had the services cut back over the years, and they want those services to be reinstated so that the community is well served. And they do pay taxes like everybody else, and they deserve their fair share.
Now, you've got a big electorate, Helen. You ride out across to the places like Wentworth. Are you heading out there sometime soon?
Yes, we'll be out there on Wednesday to meet up with a few, but of course we're anxious about the water coming down the Darling and the Murray and when it peaks. And I guess Wentworth has in the past been flooded. They talk about 1956, and I think there's a little Fergie tractor in the streets commemorating the flood work that was done out there. And I guess they're wondering whether it's going to be another 1956. They're well prepared, I think. But I'll go out there and speak to a few and make sure that they're well resourced and that as best they can handle the waters coming down.
Now, these are very interesting comments for myself, having just gone up to the South Australian Riverland. They keep talking about two peaks, one coming very shortly and another in late December, early January. It does sound like there's still a heck of a lot more water to head down into Victorian, Murray and South Australia.
Oh, I think so. And even we've had rain up in the catchment last night. And that, any water or rainfall that does occur now is just like water off a tin roof, and there's nowhere for it to go but downhill. The soil's just 100% fully saturated, and so all of that will go down into South Australia, no doubt, and hopefully it'll be contained in the rivers. But it's a very testing time for people. It really is, and I think if you're an elderly person, it looks like you have to evacuate. It's very stressful for most people, let alone them.
And how do you rate sort of how the state and federal governments have supported communities so far during the crisis?
Look, it could have been better, I think. Residents are, they're after the $1,000, which has been offered to other communities for for flooding, and I even had a woman in tears in Moolameen the other day because they're really hand to mouth, and $1,000 is not a lot of money. And I think even if your house is not flooded, you're impacted by the flooding, in that you may have to get out, or you may have to put some sandbagging around, or you're displaced in some way. So they're making that difficult. We have been looking into all of that, and I'm hoping to speak to some of the upper house members and federal government and to Murray Watt to get to even invite them out to have a look for themselves, what's needed. But more coordination, and of course there seems to be a lack of data, real-time data about flood peaks and water going down rivers, particularly around between Condobolin and Hillston. We found that out. And also with the SES, I've heard some great things that the SES have done, but we need to have local input into some of the decisions, because the locals are the ones that understand which way the rivers and creeks run or what they're going to do. And that needs to be addressed. And next year we'll certainly be raising those issues in Parliament if I'm re-elected and back on deck.
Yeah, you mentioned there the election in March next year. Just before we talk about that election and your recent trip to Canberra to meet with some federal pollies, do you get the impression, this is sort of what I'm picking up covering across the basin, do you get the impression a lot of the thinking's been about a drought orientation into the future with the Murray Darling Basin plan, and this is maybe why the data is not terribly good when it comes to flood peaks?
Well, I think you're probably correct there. They're running the dams, almost at 100%, like they're preparing for the next drought. And what we do need is adaptive management. We've got to adapt to the weather conditions at the time. And, of course, that's exacerbated flooding along the Murray. So they certainly have this notion of it's never going to rain again. And here we are. We've had more rain than we've had for many, many years. So there needs to be a recalibrating of mindset. We are a land of droughts and flooding rains, and I don't think anything's changed with that. So we need to make sure that the governments or the people that are managing our dams are looking at probably very alternative weather patterns, and that they adjust, because that's what we have to do on the land.
Yeah, I noticed, the likes of Tim Flannery many years ago, there was these suggestions that dams wouldn't fill anymore, but now the climate change narrative is we're going to see more of these extreme weather events, which would include flooding, so surely it's prudent to cover all the scenarios.
Oh, you'd think so, but it's very frustrating. You find, the government policy after a terrible drought, they'll be gearing their minds to drought, and then they'll get whipped with flooding, and then it'll be about flooding conditions. If we could just walk a very adaptive line and make sure that we are nimble and we can change tack. They put an awful lot of money into the Bureau of Meteorology, and the Bureau has been saying all year that we will get above average rainfall. It's not going to stop raining, and they weren't wrong. And yet the dams were at pretty much 96% plus capacity, and we were pleading with them to drop the levels, like release some of the water from about June, July onwards, just to take the pressure off. And they didn't do that. So that's resulted in a lot of people being impacted more than they would have normally from these rainfall events, because they've released water to take the pressure off the dams far too late.
Yeah, I've been watching those figures myself. You're absolutely right. They were keeping them in the high 90s for most of the year. Helen, when it comes to the state election, there's a Nationals candidate running against you. You yourself were elected for the Shooters, Fishers and Farmers Party, but are now an independent. How are you sensing the mood in the electorate at the moment?
It's going to be interesting. Yes, we've got now a Nationals candidate. It's taken them a long time to find somebody. So here it is, December. And the March election will be on the 25th. So I think it's going to be interesting. Going up against a party machine, I certainly won't be taking anything for granted. I've got to continue to work really hard. But we've had some major wins over the last few years. I mean, the reason why I ran was because we had very little money coming into our electorate, and it was a safe national seat. And then contesting the election in 2019 resulted in about 500 million coming into the electorate. We've never seen so much money, and I think in the 4 years, going along from that, we've had probably another 200 million. Bit hard to quantify, but I would think at least 700 million has come into the seat of Murray over the last 4 years, and that is just amazing compared to the past, pre-2019. So I'm looking forward to the government making lots of promises and pledging money to win, perhaps win the hearts and minds of people back. But being an independent is amazing. I think that to have this seat as a marginal seat now is what's called for if you want the attention. And we're certainly getting the attention. We've had the Prime Minister come into Griffith twice, and we've never, in the last couple of months, and we've never ever had a Prime Minister before. We've had Dominic Perrottet in the electorate as well, and we've also had Chris Minns, the Labor opposition minister. So I love it when we get the seat of Murray gets a lot of attention. It's fantastic. It's good for us. And they've certainly got their eye on us, and that's terrific. So we'll just continue to work hard.
Well, the Nationals will probably be cock-a-hoop after the Victorian election in November, where they knocked 3 independents out of seats there, and they threw the kitchen sink just across the border at Mildura, about 750 million they pledged, and fortunately they don't have to deliver them because they're in opposition. And isn't that a relevant point, is that it may not be certain that Dom Perrottet will be the Premier after the March?
No, well, that's true. Absolutely. So the Victorian system's a little bit different to ours, where the preferences do count, whereas for us in New South Wales, we just have to put number one. You can number down if you want to, but you can just put number one next to your candidate. So it's a little bit different. And, of course, we've got rules that say you can't spend any more than about 190,000 on getting elected. And whereas the National Party threw an extreme amount of money at Mildura and other seats to gain control of those seats again, even though they didn't win the most of the primary vote. It was all sort of preferenced.
We could well see a government, though, make a whole lot of pledges in terms of infrastructure and other post-flooding improvements to probably grow their stakes in your seat.
Oh, no doubt. But, it's whoever wins, I think, in New South Wales, it'll be basically a hung parliament. It'll be a hung parliament, and that will mean that they'll need the independents, and that will mean that I'll get a fair bit of attention, and the seat will, obviously, and which will be fantastic for us.
Good to cover some territory there, Helen. I do want to get a debrief from you before we wrap up for the year on your trip to Canberra. You'd said a number of times you were trying to get a meeting with Water Minister Tanya Plibersek about the Murray Darling Basin plan. Did you end up getting one?
I did. I said to her, like her staffer, I was there, and they still wouldn't commit to a meeting. And I said, I just want, I'm here in Canberra now. I'm in the building. Anyway, I did get 15 minutes, which is good. And we talked about the 450 and ways of delivering that without impacting on communities and irrigators. But I was a little bit concerned. That I don't know whether they truly understand the system on irrigators, and I don't think that they understand the implications of buybacks and how it does mess with the water market, and it creates a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety. But we pushed home that point, but I did request another meeting, and I did invite her to the seat of Murray, so we'll be pushing that, writing to her again and asking her or requesting that she come and meet with the stakeholders, because we don't believe that she's met with a few probably people, Labor people or people that weren't really total stakeholders with water. We need to meet with the people on the ground that are the community members and the irrigators to understand what's going on and the impacts of buybacks on them.
And Helen, did you get a meeting with Agriculture Minister Murray Watt? I think you were trying to catch him as well.
I did, and he gave me a fair bit of time, which was terrific. So we talked about a national ag plan, talked about water. So he is interested in water, and we need to see him in the seat of Murray as well, because you've got to understand these people. They're city MPs, and coming to the seat of Murray is like flying to Mars. I think for many of them, they don't really get the concept of what it is that we do and really how it is that we we really add to the economy. I think agriculture really underpins the economy, whether they like it or not. It does. Most of our jobs come from basically from ag or mining, and which is from the soil. So important that Murray Watts understands exactly the implications of some of the decisions that they make on us in the seat of Murray.
Well, Murray Watt in the seat of Murray, that'd be a good thing to see in 2023. Helen Dalton, thanks so much for joining us today. All the best for next year and have a great Christmas break.
No, thank you, and just wish everybody in the seat of Murray a great Christmas. Take it easy and take care, and we'll see you back in 2023.